Here's something I want you to think about. Your body is burning fuel right now. At this very moment, sitting there watching this video, your cells are taking something and converting it into energy. The question is, what is it burning? Because here's the thing nobody tells you. If your body is burning the wrong fuel, it doesn't matter how clean you eat, it doesn't matter how many miles you log, you are not going to lose body fat. You literally cannot, because you can only lose body fat by burning it. And if your body is busy burning something else, that fat is going nowhere. I got attacked when I started talking about this. Doctors came after me. Dietitians came after me. They thought I was going to cause harm. And I sat down and I looked through all the data and I said, well, why? Why are we so resistant to asking a simple question? What is this person's body actually burning right now? I've spent years working with patients who were eating clean, exercising, doing everything right, and their visceral fat, the fat wrapped around their organs, the dangerous kind, wouldn't move a single millimeter. And now I understand exactly why. Today, I'm going to show you 3 things. First, the real reason most people cannot burn body fat no matter what they try, and it has nothing to do with willpower or effort. Second, the foods and habits that send the exact biochemical signal your body needs to switch fuel sources. And third, how you can actually measure what your body is burning in real time. Something that used to require a hospital lab and now fits in your hand. 3 weeks? If you apply what I'm about to share, 3 weeks is genuinely enough time to start noticing a real difference. Let's get into it. RCT, the real problem, fuel, insulin, and the switch your body has been stuck on. Let me explain this simply. Your body has 2 fuels. Glucose, that's carbohydrates, and fat, whether that's dietary fat or the fat stored on your body. That's it. Those are your options. Protein isn't really used as fuel. Muscle, bone, tissue, those are structural. Your body does everything it can to protect them. So the question is, at any given moment, which one is your body burning? And here's why that question matters more than anything else in weight loss. The only way to lose body fat is to burn it. If your body is running on glucose all day long, burning carbs, your stored fat is untouched. It's sitting there. And you can be in a calorie deficit technically and still not be burning fat, because fat burning and glucose burning are completely different metabolic pathways. You cannot burn both simultaneously at full capacity. Your body has to choose. Scientists have been measuring this for decades using something called the respiratory quotient, the RQ. It's a ratio. When your body burns carbohydrates, it produces 1 molecule of carbon dioxide for every molecule of oxygen it consumes. That gives you an RQ of 1.0. When your body burns fat, it produces 0.7 molecules of carbon dioxide per molecule of oxygen. So if your RQ is close to 1.0, you're burning mostly carbs. If it's close to 0.7, you're burning mostly fat. I looked at the data, and the data is clear. A study tracking non-obese women over 3 years found a strong correlation between their respiratory quotient and subsequent weight change. Women whose RQ was closer to 0.7, fat burners, lost weight over those 3 years. Women whose RQ stayed closer to 1.0, carb burners, gained the most weight. In some cases, 20 pounds. Another study on weight loss rebound showed the same pattern at 3 months and 12 months post-diet. People who kept weight off had RQs closer to fat burning. People who regained had RQs closer to 1.0. This isn't a small finding. This is predicting your entire weight trajectory from a single measurement. So the question becomes, what determines which fuel your body burns? The answer is one word: insulin. Think of insulin like a switch. When insulin is high, when it's been spiked by a meal, especially a carbohydrate-heavy one, the switch is in storage mode. Your body is actively storing energy. Fat burning is essentially locked out. You cannot access stored fat as fuel when insulin is elevated. The biochemistry doesn't allow it. When insulin drops during a fast, between meals, when carbohydrate intake is low, the switch flips. Fat burning mode opens. Your body can now reach into those fat stores and start pulling energy out of them. And here's what most people don't understand about visceral fat specifically. Visceral fat, the fat packed around your liver, your pancreas, your intestines, is not the same as the fat under your skin. It's biologically active tissue. It produces its own inflammatory hormones. It responds to insulin more aggressively than subcutaneous fat. And when you have chronically high insulin from chronically high carbohydrate intake, visceral fat builds up faster. And it's the last to go. So visceral fat is not just a calorie problem. It's an insulin problem. It's a signal problem. And until you change the signal, the fat doesn't move. But insulin is only half of it. There's another hormone that almost nobody talks about in the context of belly fat: cortisol. Cortisol is your stress hormone. And your body releases it in response to any perceived threat: emotional stress, physical stress, sleep deprivation, under-eating, even scrolling your phone first thing in the morning. The body cannot distinguish between a charging lion and a difficult conversation with your boss. Any stress elevates cortisol. And what does cortisol do? It tells your body it's under threat. It activates emergency survival mechanisms. And one of those mechanisms, one that is very well documented, is the accumulation of visceral fat as an emergency energy reserve. Think about that. Your body is hoarding fat around your organs because it believes it might need it to survive. And it won't let go of that reserve until it feels safe. So you can eat perfectly. You can exercise consistently. And if your cortisol is chronically elevated in the background, your visceral fat is not going anywhere because your body genuinely believes it needs it. I ask every patient I work with one question: what is your hidden cortisol source? Because almost everyone has one, and most of them have never named it. We'll come back to that. But first, let's talk about how to change your fuel source, starting tomorrow morning. RCT3, the morning drink. This is the first thing I'd have every morning if my goal was to start shifting my body toward fat burning. 2 ingredients. And the science behind it is real. 2 cups of warm water, 2 tablespoons of fresh lemon juice, 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. Stir. Drink through a straw. Before coffee. Before food. Before anything. I've been recommending this to patients for years, specifically those who come to me frustrated, eating well, exercising, and their belly still feels like it's protruding. Their digestion feels sluggish. They feel like the food just sits there after a meal. And consistently, after as little as a week of doing this every morning, not 7 months, 7 days, they come back saying their stomach feels flatter, their bloating is down. They feel different. Here's why it works. Apple cider vinegar activates something called alpha-glucosidase inhibition. That's the enzyme that breaks down dietary starch into glucose. When you inhibit that enzyme, you slow down the conversion of carbohydrates into glucose in your gut. You blunt the glucose spike. You blunt the insulin spike that follows. A meta-analysis of 10 randomized controlled trials found that apple cider vinegar reduced fasting blood glucose by close to 20 points. That's in the neighborhood of some pharmaceutical interventions for insulin resistance. And it's a tablespoon of something you can buy for under $2. Lower glucose spike, lower insulin spike. That switch I was talking about, it stays a little closer to fat burning mode. The warm water and lemon juice prime the digestive system. They stimulate gastric acid production and prepare the digestive enzymes before your first meal arrives. A lot of people are eating healthy foods, but their digestion is sluggish. They're not actually extracting the nutrition they need. The foods go in, but the body isn't ready. This drink changes that. Now I want to be honest with you about something. I don't drink this every morning anymore. Once I restructured my diet, once I removed the ultra-processed foods, once my gut was healthy and my insulin was more consistently regulated, my body started doing this naturally. The drink was a tool for a specific phase, not a permanent crutch. That's how I want you to think about it. For the next 3 weeks, have this first thing every morning. Think of it as retraining your metabolism's starting position. The goal is to eventually not need it because your daily habits are doing that work for you. But for right now, start here. RCT4, the ginger mechanism. Why dried beets fresh? Here's something that surprises almost everyone I tell it to. Dried ginger powder, the cheap stuff in a jar at any grocery store, is actually more metabolically powerful than fresh ginger for blood sugar control. Not marginally, significantly. And the reason comes down to a specific chemical transformation that happens when ginger is heated. Let me explain. Fresh ginger is dominated by compounds called gingerols, particularly 6-gingerol. These are beneficial, and we'll come back to what fresh ginger does well. But when ginger is dried or heated, something specific happens. Gingerols lose a water molecule under thermal stress and convert into a different class of compounds called shogazoles. And shogazoles, it turns out, are considerably more potent. A 2018 study looking at ginger's bioactive compounds under different drying conditions found that hot air drying at 150 degrees Celsius produced the highest concentrations of all three major shogazoles and the strongest antioxidant activity. Standard dry ginger powder sits right in that range. Now, why does this matter for fat loss and blood sugar? 3 mechanisms working simultaneously. The first, shogazoles activate something called AMPK in muscle and liver tissue. AMPK is your body's cellular energy sensor. When it's activated, it drives glucose transporters to the cell surface and allows glucose to enter cells without requiring insulin. You're essentially creating an insulin-independent pathway for glucose clearance. This is the same mechanism that metformin, one of the most commonly prescribed diabetes drugs in the world, uses. You're getting a similar signal from a spice. The second, both gingerols and shogazoles inhibit alpha-glucosidase and alpha-amylase. Those are the enzymes that break dietary starch into glucose in your gut. Slow those enzymes, you blunt the post-meal glucose spike. Lower glucose spike, lower insulin response, more time in fat-burning mode. The third, TRPV1 activation. This is the one I find most fascinating. TRPV1 is usually described as a pain and heat receptor, but that massively undersells what it does. It's a sensor involved in temperature regulation, inflammation signaling, energy expenditure, and metabolic regulation. Shogazoles bind to TRPV1 with a stronger affinity than gingerols. They have a longer, more water-resistant molecular tail that makes tighter contact with the receptor binding pocket. And when TRPV1 is activated in pancreatic beta cells, it modulates insulin secretion dynamics, better insulin secretion timing, more precise glucose management, and here's where it gets even more interesting. One specific compound produced during the drying process called 10-shogol triggers all of this. The TRPV1 activation, the adrenaline secretion, the thermogenic fat burning signal, without producing any pungent burning sensation whatsoever. It's a metabolic free ride. Now, what does fresh ginger do that dried doesn't? Fresh ginger, because of its high 6-gingerol content, activates a process called fat browning. It converts white adipose tissue, the inert storage fat, into metabolically active beige fat. Beige fat behaves more like brown fat. It dissipates energy as heat instead of storing it. Better mitochondrial density, more uncoupling protein expression, a higher resting energy expenditure. Mice fed fresh ginger in research studies showed resistance to weight gain and better cold tolerance. So here's how I think about it. Dried ginger powder is your blood sugar and direct fat burning tool. 1 to 3 grams per day, ideally in a fasted state or just before a carbohydrate heavy meal. Mix it with olive oil or have it with a fat containing food. Shogazoles are fat soluble. Their bioavailability improves significantly with dietary fat. Fresh ginger is your long-term metabolic remodeling tool. Have it with higher protein meals for the added thermic effect. Consistency matters more than timing. They're not interchangeable. They work different pathways. Use both. ACT5. The foods, 7 targets, 5 pathways. If my only goal was to specifically target visceral fat, here's what I'd eat every single day. Not a complicated meal plan, not 100 supplements, 7 foods, 5 biochemical pathways. That's it. Cover the liver, address insulin, reduce inflammation, fix the gut, Regulate cortisol. Hit all 5 and the visceral fat starts running out of places to hide. Number 1, whole eggs, yolk included. I know some people are still nervous about the yolks. I want to be clear, the yolk is exactly where the value is. Eggs are one of the only foods that naturally contain meaningful amounts of choline, and choline directly supports your liver's ability to metabolize and export fat. When the liver is struggling, and a struggling liver and visceral fat almost always move together, your body accumulates visceral fat faster. Choline is what keeps that process running cleanly. Have 2 to 3 eggs a day. I have 3. If you're having none right now, start with 1. If you're having 1, move to 2. The B vitamins and vitamin D in the yolk support both energy metabolism and insulin sensitivity. The fats support blood sugar stability. This is one of the most complete single foods for visceral fat. Number 2, wild-caught salmon or sardines. Visceral fat survives by staying inflamed. That's not a metaphor. Visceral fat tissue actively produces pro-inflammatory cytokines that keep itself in a state of chronic low-grade inflammation. And that inflammation is what makes it so metabolically stubborn. The EPA and DHA in fatty fish go directly at that inflammation. They reduce it inside fat tissue. They also improve insulin sensitivity and, critically, they reduce liver fat accumulation. When the liver improves, visceral fat follows. 2 to 3 portions a week, 4 to 6 ounces. Sardines in a can work perfectly well. Small fish, low mercury, easy to have as a snack. Number 3, blueberries. Blueberries are packed with anthocyanins, the compounds that give them that deep blue-purple color. And research has linked anthocyanins directly to reduced visceral fat and improved insulin sensitivity. A cross-sectional analysis found that higher anthocyanin intake was associated with 9% lower visceral fat tissue, 9% from eating a cup of blueberries. The mechanism: anthocyanins suppress key inflammatory pathways in fat tissue, promote beneficial gut bacteria, and increase the speed of lipolysis, the actual breakdown of stored fat. They essentially help your body use fat as fuel instead of hoarding it. 1 cup a day, mix it into full-fat Greek yogurt, and you're hitting 2 birds with 1 handful. Number 4, full-fat plain Greek yogurt. 2 things happen when you eat this. The protein, Greek yogurt, has significantly more than regular yogurt because it's strained, keeps you full longer, and supports muscle preservation. More muscle means a faster resting metabolism. That's straightforward. But the second part is the one most people miss. The live cultures in yogurt feed your gut microbiome. And there is a direct, well-established link between the state of your gut and visceral fat accumulation. A struggling microbiome almost always predicts stubborn visceral fat. A meta-analysis found that higher yogurt consumption was associated with a 21% reduction in abdominal obesity. A large observational study in UK twins showed that yogurt intake was associated with reduced visceral fat mass independent of other dietary factors. Plain, full fat, no added flavoring. Check the label, it must say live cultures. Sweeten it yourself with blueberries, a drizzle of honey, or a spoonful of protein powder. Number 5, extra virgin olive oil. A double-blind placebo-controlled trial. That's the gold standard of research. Gave one group of participants about 1.5 tablespoons of olive oil daily as part of a calorie-restricted diet. The other group got soybean oil. Same calories, same restriction. Over 9 weeks, the olive oil group lost 80% more fat. 80% more fat. Same calorie math, different fuel signal. The mechanism is polyphenols, particularly compounds that activate 2 pathways called AMPK and SIRT1. AMPK is the same energy sensor I mentioned with ginger. Activated, it tells your body to burn fat instead of storing it. SIRT1 improves mitochondrial efficiency in muscle, meaning your muscles are better equipped to burn calories as energy rather than routing them into storage. 1 to 2 tablespoons a day. Drizzle it over food. Don't cook with it at high heat. That degrades the polyphenols. Number 6, broccoli sprouts. Not regular broccoli, the sprouts. This distinction is important. Broccoli sprouts contain 20 to 100 times more sulforaphane precursors than mature broccoli. A half cup of fresh sprouts delivers what a full plate of broccoli cannot come close to matching. Sulforaphane activates something called NRF2. Think of it as your body's master control center for inflammation and oxidative stress. When NRF2 switches on, it activates a whole network of genes that protect mitochondria and calm inflammation. And because visceral fat thrives in an inflamed environment, when inflammation drops, visceral fat becomes metabolically unstable. It stops behaving like a hormone factory and starts breaking down. But sulforaphane does something else that's specifically important for visceral fat. It tells the liver to slow down gluconeogenesis, the process by which the liver manufactures glucose even when blood sugar is already high. Excess liver glucose output is one of the biggest drivers of visceral fat storage. Sulforaphane directly suppresses it. Half a cup raw every day, eat it as part of a salad or blend into a smoothie. And do it consistently. Sulforaphane has a very short half-life, it doesn't accumulate. Daily exposure is what sends the repeated signal your liver and fat tissue need. Number 7, walnuts. Walnuts are exceptionally rich in alpha-linolenic acid, a plant-based omega-3 and in polyunsaturated fatty acids and fiber. Studies show that high intake of polyunsaturated fats over 12 months reduced visceral fat as measured by MRI, even without calorie restriction. And the visceral fat loss was independent of overall body weight change. The scale didn't move, the visceral fat did. LA calms the inflammatory signals that visceral fat produces to keep itself alive. It improves insulin sensitivity. And walnuts increase leptin and adiponectin, the hormones that regulate satiety and fat metabolism. A small handful a day, add them to your yogurt, your salad, your oatmeal, those 7 foods. Together they cover every major pathway through which visceral fat builds up and refuses to leave. Axis behaviors, the free protocol that most people skip. Now here's the part of this video I want you to pay the most attention to. Because you can eat every single one of those 7 foods, you can have the morning drink, you can track your respiratory quotient, and if you're doing a few specific things every day that keep your cortisol chronically elevated, your visceral fat will not move. Full stop. Visceral fat is a stress response. The body stores it when cortisol is chronically high because cortisol is your threat signal. It tells your body it's under some kind of attack. And when the body feels like it's constantly under attack, it hoards visceral fat like an emergency energy reserve. Because in a survival scenario, it genuinely believes it needs it. Here are 4 habits. All of them are free. All of them target visceral fat through the cortisol and insulin pathways directly. Habit 1, eat protein first. Whatever is on your plate, eat the protein before anything else. Before the fruit, before the yogurt, before the toast, eggs first, meat first, fish first. Here's why this specifically matters for visceral fat. When you eat protein at the start of a meal, it slows the release of glucose from everything you eat after it. The fiber in vegetables helps too. Together, they create what researchers call a buffer. A slower, steadier glucose absorption. You blunt the insulin spike from the carbohydrates that follow. And when you blunt the insulin spike, you keep the body closer to fat burning mode, even after eating. You also fill up on the most satiating macronutrient first. You naturally eat less without restriction. This costs $0 and requires no new foods, just change the order. Habit 2, walk for 10 minutes after your biggest meal. Not a gym session, not a run, just get up and move continuously for 10 minutes after eating. Research shows that a short walk after eating can reduce the blood sugar spike from that meal by up to 30%. And anytime you blunt a blood sugar spike, you're also blunting the insulin response that follows. 10 minutes of moving your body. That's the entire intervention. Our bodies were not designed to eat and then sit completely still for hours. Movement after meals is one of the highest leverage-free habits you can build. Even pacing around your kitchen while the dish is dry counts. Habit 3, sleep in a cold room. Set your thermostat to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, about 18 Celsius tonight. And keep the same bedtime and wake up time every single day, including weekends. Here's why this targets visceral fat directly. For your body to enter deep sleep, your core temperature has to drop. If your room is too warm, that process is disrupted. And deep sleep is when your body releases the most growth hormone. Growth hormone is your primary overnight fat-burning hormone. Deep sleep also produces the most restoration of insulin sensitivity. Every disrupted night is a step backward on both of those fronts. And every time you sleep in on a Saturday, you reset your internal clock. You shift your circadian rhythm. You make the next several nights harder. Consistency is the actual intervention. Cold room, same schedule every day. Habit 4, keep your phone out of the bedroom. I know this one is the hardest, but here's why it matters specifically for visceral fat, not just general health. Cortisol follows a natural daily curve. It's supposed to peak in the early morning, then drop through the day, then fall low in the evening so your body can rest and recover. When the last thing you do before sleeping is look at your phone screen, you spike cortisol at exactly the moment it should be falling. When the first thing you do in the morning is grab your phone, you spike it again before your body has had time to regulate. You're disrupting both ends of that cortisol curve. Every single day, charge your phone in another room. Give yourself 30 minutes in the morning without any screen. Most of my patients who make just this one change report that their general anxiety noticeably drops within a week. Anxiety down, cortisol down, visceral fat starts responding. And now I want you to ask yourself a harder question. What is your hidden cortisol source? Because the most common ones aren't obvious. They're not the big dramatic stresses. They're the chronic, low-grade, invisible ones. Not sleeping enough, not eating enough. The body interprets restriction as famine. Over-exercising without adequate recovery. The mentality of never being enough, never successful enough, never productive enough, never providing enough. That voice that never turns off is cortisol that never turns off. I work with patients in their 70 seconds, retired, financially secure, objectively stable lives who are still running that internal script. Still carrying visceral fat they cannot shift because their nervous system has never learned to feel safe. Sometimes a food protocol won't fix that. If the cortisol is coming from something deeper, patterns from childhood, chronic anxiety, relentless self-criticism that requires a different kind of support. Therapy is not just for people in crisis, it's for the chronic low-grade stress that most of us have simply accepted as normal, but our bodies are quietly responding to it every single day. Name your hidden cortisol source. Because if you don't address it, nothing else in this video will be enough. Axiate 7. Intermittent fasting. What the evidence actually says. Let me address the myth directly, because it's the one I've spent the most time fighting. People say fasting slows your metabolism. Your basal metabolic rate will drop. You'll go into starvation mode. When you start eating again, you'll gain everything back. I looked through the literature, I went looking for the evidence, and I said, well, why would that be true? Take a study where you fast someone for 4 days and you measure their basal metabolic rate at day 0 before they start, and then at day 4 with 0 food. What do you find? Their metabolic rate went up, not down, by around 10%. Think about what that means. 4 days of eating nothing. And the body is burning more calories, not fewer. The reason is basic physiology. When you don't eat, insulin falls. When insulin falls, your body starts pulling energy out of storage. First liver glycogen, then body fat. At the same time, other hormones activate. Sympathetic tone rises, growth hormone rises. These are activation signals. Your body is not shutting down, it is mobilizing. Think about a hungry wolf. Is he lethargic, sluggish? No. He's more alert, more activated, more dangerous than a lion who just ate a full meal and is lying in the shade with no reason to move. Hunger activates. A full stomach slows you down. We've had this completely backwards. Now what about the claim that fasting makes you overeat later? The data consistently shows that compensation after a fast is incomplete. People do not eat back all of the calories they skipped. Ghrelin, the hunger hormone, is not a simple linear escalator. It peaks and then it passes. And with consistent fasting practice, it adapts. Hunger becomes manageable, then predictable, then easy. And muscle loss, growth hormone rises significantly during fasting. And growth hormone is specifically a muscle protective hormone. During short to moderate fasting windows, 16 to 48 hours, muscle is actively preserved, the body is not stupid, it knows the difference between an emergency requiring immediate muscle catabolism and a brief window of food absence. So let's go back to the respiratory quotient. You eat, insulin rises. Fat burning shuts down, body runs on glucose, RQ close to 1.0, you fast, insulin falls, fat burning opens, body pulls from stored fat. RQ drops towards 0.7. It is the simplest possible equation. If you want your body to burn fat, you need periods where insulin is low enough to allow it. That's what fasting creates. And visceral fat, because it's so sensitive to insulin, responds especially quickly. I'd start with a 12-hour eating window, 8 in the morning to 8 at night. Most people are already close to that without trying. Just close the kitchen after 8 and don't open it until 8. Simple. From there, if it feels right, move towards 16-8, eating between noon and 8 in the evening, but never force it. Never combine aggressive fasting with aggressive calorie restriction at the same time. That's the fastest route to elevated cortisol and stalled fat loss. Eat to satiety during your eating window, protein first. And if you're pregnant, breastfeeding, on blood sugar medication, or have any history of disordered eating, talk to your physician before making changes. ACT8. Knowing what your body is actually doing, here's something that changed how I think about all of this. For decades, if you wanted to know what fuel your body was burning, whether your respiratory quotient was closer to fat burning or carb burning, you needed specialized laboratory equipment, a metabolic cart, a mask, a treadmill, someone monitoring you. It was a clinical procedure, not a daily habit. That's changed. There are now handheld devices that measure what's called the respiratory exchange ratio, a close approximation of the respiratory quotient, using a simple carbon dioxide sensor and a flow meter. You breathe into the device. It measures how much carbon dioxide you're producing relative to oxygen consumption. It gives you your RER. And the research shows that the RER measured by consumer-grade breath devices corresponds very closely to the respiratory quotient measured by gold standard clinical equipment. Why does this matter? Because biofeedback is everything. Think about this. If you're learning to shoot free throws, you get immediate feedback after every shot. Too short, too far left, went in. You adjust in real time. That feedback loop is what produces improvement. But with your diet, with your metabolism, you eat something and then you wait. You wait days, you wait weeks. You step on a scale and the number is the same and you don't know if the problem is the food, the timing, the stress, the sleep, or something else entirely. There's no feedback. You're practicing in the dark. Real-time metabolic monitoring changes that equation. If you measure your RRR first thing in the morning and you're close to 1.0 burning carbs, you know your fasting window wasn't long enough or your evening meal had too many carbohydrates, you can adjust. If you measure after a week of consistent morning drinks, consistent protein first meals, consistent evening walks, and your RRR has moved towards 0.7, you know it's working. You have confirmation, and that confirmation changes everything about motivation and consistency. I've used this with patients at my practice, and the shift is dramatic. When people can see in real time that their body is responding, that the switch is actually flipping, they stop doubting the process. They stop second guessing, and they stick with it. This is what biohacking actually means, not exotic supplements or expensive protocols. It means taking information about your own biology and using it to make better decisions. You can't manage what you can't measure. And now, for the first time, ordinary people can measure this. ACTT9, your 3-week protocol, everything in one place. Let me put this all together for you. Tomorrow morning, warm water, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. Before coffee, before food, through a straw. At breakfast, eggs first, yolk included, vegetables alongside. Whatever carbohydrates you're having, eat them last. Same food, different order, different hormonal response. After your biggest meal, 10 minutes of continuous movement, walk, pace, do the dishes. Just don't sit back down immediately. With your meals this week, add at least 3 of the 7 foods I mentioned. Eggs, salmon or sardines, blueberries, full-fat Greek yogurt, olive oil, broccoli sprouts, walnuts, cover the liver, address inflammation, support your gut, lower your insulin response. Tonight, thermostat to 65 degrees. Phone charging in another room. Same bedtime, same wake-up time, non-negotiable including Saturday. This week, answer the question honestly. What is your hidden cortisol source? Write it down if you have to, because naming it is the first step to addressing it. And if you want to actually see what your body is doing, if you want real feedback instead of guessing, consider measuring your respiratory exchange ratio. The device I've been using fits in your palm, connects to a phone app, and tells you in 2 minutes whether you're in fat burning mode or not. That feedback loop changes the game. 3 weeks is genuinely enough time to start noticing a difference. Not a month, not a year. 3 weeks of consistent signals to your metabolism, the right fuel state, the right foods, the right sleep, the cortisol source addressed, and your body starts responding. I've watched it happen with patients who came to me having tried everything, who were eating clean, who were exercising, who were doing everything right by the conventional standard. And their visceral fat wouldn't move. And then they changed the signal and everything changed. The information exists, the tools exist. The only thing missing is putting them together in the right order. Now you have it. In my next video, I'm going to show you exactly how to test your visceral fat status at home and what specific blood markers to ask your doctor to run. Because knowing you have visceral fat is one thing. Knowing how much and whether your protocol is actually shrinking it is a different level of awareness entirely. If you found this useful, subscribe. Leave me a comment below and tell me, what do you think your hidden cortisol source is? I read every one of them, and I'll see you in the next one.